As you know, when scientific mentality started growing, of course, the methods of science started having a new source of evidence that came through observation, which was there before, but then we have experimentation and predictability of these observables and so on. Now, what is evidence? Is evidence just limited to what we can see and touch? I think the problems arise when this need for evidence, as we have in science, is extended over to religion, let's say, and theology. So evidentialism is a philosophical position according to which we should not accept anything that we cannot have evidence for ourselves. And therefore, somehow religious beliefs and affirmations are undermined in this way. The major problem with this kind of argument is that we forget other sources of epistemological justification. And one of the major sources is testimony. Even within science, you cannot have all the evidence yourself. Even if we're just talking about perceptual experience, we need to depend on other work in science and so on. So this idea of testimony is very important in theology. As you know, religious traditions contained epistemological affirmations by resorting to testimony. One interesting point which we need to consider here is what to do when we have counter-evidence. And this was discussed at length. Some decades ago, it became quite sensational because people like Karl Popper and others were suggesting that, in fact, a scientific theory needs to be open to falsification.
And if it's not a scientific theory.
That's the major point. And of course, if you extend that towards religion or religious affirmations,
it fails the test.
It fails the test. And the usual conclusion there is that, therefore, religious belief and affirmation and theology in general is a kind of wishy-washy line of inquiry anyway, so it has to be sidelined or forgotten. Now, this kind of critique of the theological is somewhat naive, even within the scientific community. The idea of having just one counter-evidence, dismantling a whole theory. So we need to incorporate, even within science, the idea of holism. That means that within a theory, you have various affirmations that need other theories, and therefore when one element of counter-evidence hits a theory on one side, you can readjust the theory on other sides and keep what you said as intact. So my point is that this happens also in religion. Holism extends everywhere. So when a believer says, you know, God loves me, and yet there is an element of counter-evidence, let's say a diagnosis of terminal cancer, and then you say, well, if he were an honest inquirer, that person should actually stop believing in God. However, I think the same dynamics that we saw on the scientific side should in fact apply there as well. And what does the religious believer do? Acknowledging a kind of effective link between himself and God, he could readjust his other affirmations and try to understand things differently in his life without abandoning that original affirmation that God loves him.
If I believe in something science, I should be able to prove it to you. But if I believe something that God loves me or I had a religious experience, I can tell you, but that doesn't prove it to you. But you're saying the commonality is how robust each needs to be in terms of a holistic understanding of the theories, either in science or religion.
They are similar on that front.
On that one front.
Yes,
that's
on other fronts, they are quite different.
Right.
Because in religion, I think affirmations are just an effective link also with the affirmations we make.
And do the effective links, do they change the epistemology? Affection or emotion kind of concerns me because that can be a distortion as well as a confirmation.
That's a good point. However, I think the problem arises because we think that the standard model of inquiry should be science, and then any kind of other inquiries or affirmations kind of miss out on the standards of science. However, we should remember that there are other modes that we can use as models.